We need to be brave enough to have those tough conversations when we need it, but we need to do it in a kind way where it's more likely to be received. I can't actually do my job better if I don't know what your concerns are, and vice versa.
You're listening to Around the School Table, hosted by me, Steve Davis, and proudly powered by Zuno Suite. We'll be bringing together the many voices shaping primary and secondary education across Australia, from principals and teachers to education thought leaders and system innovators. Whether you're in the classroom, the staff room, or the boardroom, this is your podcast to be informed, inspired, and connected. On this episode of Around the School Table, we're joined by Cameron Peverett, Principal at Lake Colac School and current President of the Principals Association of Specialist Schools. Cameron's journey into special education was almost accidental, but his impact has been anything but. Been shaped by hands-on leadership, a willingness to say yes to new challenges, and a deep commitment to putting students first. From leading multiple specialist schools to championing best practice across Victoria, Cameron brings a wealth of experience and insight into what it takes to build strong, supportive school communities. And I must say, I think his story is testament to adaptability, lifelong learning, and the power of purposeful leadership. Cameron, welcome to Around the School Table.
Thanks, Steve.
Now, if I understand correctly, you began your special education journey at Warrnambool Special Development School, spent about 4.5 years there before moving to a small primary school outside Warrnambool. From there, you stepped into an acting principal role at Merry River School and then spent 7 years as principal at Hamilton Special Developmental School. Now, while at Hamilton, you joined the board of the Principals Association of Specialist Schools, eventually becoming president, which you are to this day. But this journey was almost accidental because when you were studying your degree in education, you weren't even aware that special schools was a career path. Can you shine some light, fill in some of the detail of that journey?
Yeah, I suppose I was a bit of had a few hiccups along the way when I started my teaching degree. I didn't necessarily have the most successful VCE, but was still really interested in, I suppose, seeing what I could do in the teaching space. So after a couple of attempts, I suppose I then ended up not having the best final round of teaching. So I was doing after school and holiday care program for the Warrnambool City Council. And then after doing that for a term, I said, well, I've got this teaching degree behind me. I should probably do something with it and start doing casual work. And I was getting a lot of work out of town. And then one day the agency said, oh, we've got a job for you at the special school. And I said, yep, no worries. And he says, do you know where it is? I went, nope. Do you know what it is? Nope. As much as I've, throughout my own schooling journey, have had people with disability as classmates, I had never really considered that there was a school specifically for people with disability.
And we're already getting a taste of that yes and approach coming through in the story thus far. You're a Gen Xer. And I'm led to believe that as a young teacher, you were given lots of opportunities by your principal to get your hands dirty. ICT, other tech. How much of this career is linked to being in the right place at the right time and that say yes attitude?
Yeah, 100%. Everything that I feel like has got me here today has been just purely just fortunate, being in the right place at the right time, exactly as you say. Going into education, it's a female-dominated industry. Going into special education, it's even more so. And I would say, yeah, when I started at Warrnambool Special Developmental School, there was a school of 60 students, probably around about 20 to 30 staff, but there was only 3 males. So I was given lots of opportunity, I suppose, to be a role model for the male students because they certainly needed a fair bit of that. But also, I think because of my upbringing in that sort of the Gen X age, I wouldn't have said I was a digital native, but the internet started coming in right towards the end of my schooling. And so I was very familiar with that. So that's where I suppose I started my opportunities in leadership very early in the ICT space in our specialist school.
I just want to dig one bit deeper into this yes and thing. For my sins in my past, I did a lot of theatre sports and improvisational theatre, where we are taught to say yes and, accept an idea and build on it. Once you've tasted that, you see its lack almost everywhere. If someone was intrigued about this attitude, what is it, do you think, that predisposes you to be more inclined to say yes than say no?
For me, it's probably just been a really strong moral compass as much as anything. I think I've got to where I am because I've wanted to give, I guess. I wouldn't say I don't necessarily have the most strongest altruistic attitude by any sense, but I've always run I suppose my career of just wanting to make sure that everybody gets given a fair go, because I think that was really evident when I started my teaching career, just how the large disparity, I suppose, between the haves and the have-nots, and those with advantage and those who are less advantageous or have less advantage. So I think that I've just always wanted to make sure that whatever I do is always in the best interest of the students, and that does not come without attitude and effort. So the and component is it's hard work, and it's not just your 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 3:30 or whatever I think that teachers do. It's definitely going above and beyond, but not where you at a detriment to yourself. I suppose that's where that intrinsic motivation has been. Look, if I just tick off these boxes, then that's going to make somebody's job a little bit easier, which will then hopefully have a more positive outcome for the students.
I'm getting the sense you almost have to do this personally. I get the sense that you would feel a bit withered if you were just checking in, checking out. There's I don't want to say the word calling, but there is this inclination to, roll the sleeves up and get in because there is good in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when it comes to leadership and to supporting people, it's always beginning with that end in mind. To go back to the Stephen Covey stuff, always having an idea about this is where I want to get to, and trying to bring people along for the journey. And not that I'm trying to be a role model by any stretch, but you do have to model the effort that it sometimes takes and the precision I think that it takes to be able to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, which is a bit out of step with modern culture at the moment. Actually, we do tend to interview a lot of people who have personal drive on around the school table. You took that quite literally because your master's in instructional leadership that you did had you driving 3.5 hours each way on weekends to do this. What compelled you to make that commitment, and how did that experience redefine your view of effective school leadership?
Well, I think to a certain extent, I felt that there was gaps in my knowledge. Having gone through a teaching degree there was a double degree in arts and primary education, to then find myself as a principal in my first 5 years of teaching, and then having been one for, it was about 6 years. I think I'd been a principal, and just going, look, I don't have enough knowledge around how to be the best instructional leader that I can be. So an opportunity arose where there was a scholarship, I guess, to go to the University of Melbourne. And when I looked at the list of the presenters or the professors, it was just phenomenal, with Stephen Denham, John Hattie, Patrick Griffin, and just a whole, there was the cream of the crops. I was like, well, this is too good of an opportunity to miss. So even though I was already in leadership, I wanted to understand instructional leadership better. And it was probably one of the best things that I felt I did in my career, because it helped me to really understand the data around our children and what do you need to do next to get the best out of them.
Just on that drive, how did you make use of that 3.5 hours? Was it audiobooks, podcasts? Was it thinking and reflecting time? Was it music?
Honestly, a lot of the time it's listening to talkback radio or just having that going in the background. But sometimes it's just the quiet. Um, the There are so many human interactions that we have throughout the day. Like I'm always talking to people in my role, that sometimes just sitting in the quiet and just being, it's not being present, but just giving myself a bit of a break to sort of reset before we launch into the next stage of conversation.
Decompression.
Yeah, very much so.
Now, you reference Sir Giovanni's 5 forces of leadership in the things you talk about. I believe they're technical, human, educational, symbolic, and cultural. Which of those do you find yourself drawing on most often, and how have they helped you navigate the complexities of the school culture?
I would say that, well, honestly, they're all equally important. I think sometimes in today's day and age, we don't spend enough time in the technical. It's a very technical job and lots of pitfalls. But if the job was only about the technical side, we then forget about the people who we're constantly interacting with. I think you need to be a really strong educational leader. You need to really understand the craft, not necessarily be the expert, but be expert enough to be dangerous. I think that's where my school now in Colac has had a lot of benefits. But I think it's really is also that symbolic leadership that, we use the think principle around school a lot, around conversations that we have, which is, is what you're about to say, timely, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind. So I think that to be able to focus on that, especially the kindness component, that's the big ticket for me, because we need to be brave enough to have those tough conversations when we need it. But we need to do it in a kind way where it's more likely to be received. So I suppose that's where I spend a lot of my time, is trying to model the expectations that I have of my staff to, I can't actually do my job better if I don't know what your concerns are, and vice versa.
Still wrestling with clunky reports? Switch to Accelerus, the gold standard in school reporting. From semester to continuous reporting, design stunning reports in Word, pull data from multiple sources, and share with a click. Easy, flexible, beautiful. Accelerus. Love at first report. Visit xuno.com.au.
Another angle that sort of melds symbolism and culture is those shared experiences we all have, which we don't have anymore. YouTube just put out some details to say the age of everyone watching the same thing and having shared cultural touch points is over. Their data says our environment is so fractured. Does that, and Gen Xer, you would have grown up with everyone watching the same sorts of things and having common talking points and reference points for interaction. Does that impact the education challenge today?
I think it does. It's very difficult to, now that I've been in principalship for 15 years, there's been definitely a change in the new graduates as they're coming through. Certainly, the attention span, the attention to detail, the attention to plan and actually be well prepared, but also be prepared to throw out whatever you've planned. I think that seems to be something that's a little bit lost, because everything is so responsive and so high energy and so, dopamine driven, that sometimes it can be really difficult to, let's just narrow this down and let's get this short and sharp focus on what we're actually trying to achieve here.
Now, I hate to say it, but internal politics does come up in leadership roles. And in some of the stories I've heard about you, waiting, listening, building consensus has been a part of your 15 years of principalship. What advice do you have for new principals who are stepping into particularly politically charged school environments?
Yeah, I don't think you can underestimate the time that takes to just listen. I think it still goes back to, what do you think ought to be achieved here? So we don't lose that, and we remind people of what we're trying to achieve here. But we have to bring people along on that journey. I've spent a little bit of time dabbling in the Patrick Lencioni 5 dysfunctions of a team elements, and that can be really powerful work, although it's more business oriented. But it starts off the foundation of trust, that build that trust with your team. And most leadership models that I look at around, distributed leadership and instructional leadership and all, it all seems to be built on trust. So you need to get runs on the board, I think, with your staff where sometimes relationships are a little bit broken. You need to show that, look, I've done this myself. I've been through the hard yards. I'm also prepared to muck in, and I'm prepared to take your classes to give you more time to do what you need to do. So I try to be, I run my philosophy around every classroom every day. So even if it's just a one quick whip around for 10, 15 minutes just to poke my head in and say, hey, I'm here, I'm present. If that's all I can give you today, I'll give it. Otherwise, I'm in there. I'll have some professional conversations. I'm trying to make it a real habit. And some of the new teachers are a little bit freaked out, but actually appearing in the classroom and just watching. And they'll it took quite a while when you've got a staff that can be a little bit already unsettled. They go, "What are you doing here? Why are you in my classroom?" It's like, I'm not here to judge. I'm actually just here to enjoy the space you're in at the moment.
And how has that transformed the culture at the school and the work of the teachers and your own leadership, this presence, this mucking in?
Well, I think it's just built this really, it's a really pleasant vibe. I think there's a lot of, when it comes to what we see around the kids as well, like the students seem to be a lot more settled. We've built better relationships with our parents, because when it looks like we're all on the same team and we all have the same goal, I think that it just builds a better culture and you become somewhat attractive. For a small specialist school in rural regional Victoria, we've grown 40% over the last 5 or 6 years in both staff and students, which for a school that's not in the in the belt of Western Melbourne or over in the east, I think that's quite astounding that we're being seen in the community as a school that's a legitimate choice for those students who are qualified to be here.
I just want to go back to where you talked about trust in working with the staff around a school and the reference material that you use to build those models. They don't happen in a vacuum. We get news coverage, particularly from the US every day, in which fake news is a way to just don't care. The fabric of trust has been eroded to a point of uselessness. Does that create headwinds? Has that made this harder, this valuing of trust? Because everything in mass media, especially news, seems to be suggesting it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
If I understand the question, I think that for me, I suppose I've got 4 pillars that I try to operate under, which is almost a combination of things that I've learned over the years. One of them is around, instructional leadership. So make sure I've got that really tight. The building of trust, that we have shared leadership as well. So we distribute the leadership so that everybody gets a portfolio fairly early in their journey with me, because I want them to actually get a taste of leadership and a taste of what it's, what's easy to do and what's not easy to do. So we've got a good idea around what the school leaders are trying to grapple with at the same time, as well as developing capacity. But then it's also that the 4th pillar is around expertise. So making sure that we are the experts and really understand it. So it's not just picking up a program or a model or whatever. It's going, okay, what's the research that sits underneath that? And does it actually fit us? Does it fit our students, our school, our cohort? My school, so we've got 92% of my families are in the 2 bottom quartiles of socioeconomic advantage. So we're quite a disadvantaged school. However, we have been shown that in our reading, the way that we teach our kids using evidence-based practices, not just a program, we're bucking the curve around what students with intellectual disabilities can do with their reading proficiency. So, and that's not because we just grabbed a model and just started to do it. We we are dedicated to being experts in understanding how this works. So when you talk about the noise that's out there, we don't listen too much of it. We hear like the science of reading, science of learning, that's very popular now, and we've got the phonics mandate in Victoria. That's all really important and does match in a lot with what we do. But there is not any one program or any one theory or any one thing that actually fits any individual school's context 100%. So you need to go back to the research and what does the evidence actually say before you go, okay, that program is, the strongest horse in the race.
You've got a belief, and I think rightly so, that you have to focus on what's best for the kids first, which is your Stephen Covey reference from earlier, begin with the end in mind. I understand this can also mean you need to get the best out of teachers, which we're just starting to talk about. What specific systems or habits have you developed to support and stretch your staff without overwhelming them? Perhaps building on some of these first things we've talked about with that taste of leadership and that responsibility.
So one of the things that we've really focused on is trying to get our instructional practices right, so we can get it right down to the fine grain. If you just do this and do this well, then you'll be able to cover a lot of areas. So that comes down to our planning, our preparation, our resources. We've got some big, like everything that comes through into the school as an idea goes through the leadership team to go, does this marry our practices or not? So there are educational in inverted commas, websites out there that have lots of black line masters, hey, just do this and pump out the worksheets. But if they don't align, well, there's some that we just absolutely blacklist because we know it's not based on any evidence. So I think that by being able to streamline those items and have pre-planned documents, generated resources already, so it's basically a pick up and serve, it's taken a lot of the cognitive load off our teachers, which has meant that they haven't had to spend hours and hours building resources, but they can spend that time developing their practice and researching and understanding why do we do what we do and the way that we do it. So we have a number of meetings throughout the week where the first one is our professional learning communities, which is about building the expertise within the school. So they break into separate areas. One's English, one's maths, one's our senior pathways, because I have so I've got 3-year-olds to 18-year-olds in my school. So senior pathways is a really important one. And then we also have a well-being one. So how do we make sure we're nailing that at the same time? Our second meeting of the week is always purely professional learning. So what are we doing to make sure that we understand that when we're teaching in a phonics program, or it might just be going back to some research around cognitive load theory, it could be whatever it is that's needed at the time, to make sure that our teachers have a really good understanding of why they are doing what they're doing. The what has to come first. We always say, this is how you do it, just trust us, do it this way, and then we'll explain the why after. Because if you spend too much time in the why, then you'll get lots of questions, and it just drags everything down. It slows everything down. So just do it this way, and we'll provide you with the why after. The other thing that we're really we have a third meeting, which sort of alternates a little bit, but we make sure we try to onboard our teachers really well. So our beginning teachers who are new to the profession, or just new teachers who are new to our school, every week come together with our learning specialist, and they have an opportunity to ask the dumb questions, which are never dumb. It's like there's always enough in the room that everyone needs to know. It needs to get that direction. So, how do we plan better? What does it mean when you say this? What are our protocols around putting our hands up in the classroom or lining up or whatever it might be? So we go really fine grained with them, saying this is the way that we do things around here. That has meant that we've had a fantastic retention of staff, but it also has meant that where it hasn't resonated, if teachers are dedicated to doing things their own way rather than the way that we know works, then I'm more than happy for them to shuffle off and go off to another school. That's probably one of the big things that we've had to do around building trust and teacher capacity and make them feel like they belong. We've had to spend a lot of time in that space because teacher autonomy in my school has reduced quite significantly because we have such a particular way in teaching. There can be a perception of a lack of creativity is afforded to the teachers. That's not true, but there are particular times or particular subject areas where you can bring in your flair, but it's not through these core learning things, because around, where we understand how the brain works and how it learns in particular areas. That's where we say, sorry, you don't have a say in this bit. This bit's too important to speculate and just try and experiment. Let's do what we know works. The rest of it, that's where you can bring in your creativity and flair and help to build those relationships bigger and all of that.
Wow. There's so much nuance in the way this is run. I love the idea of cognitive load being almost guarded so that we don't spend it on stuff that is of low quality. And I've long been a fan of that thought that creativity thrives best when it has got some restraints around it. It'll find a way to get out. And I'd like to think some of that energy then is reserved and be able to use in those teacher-student bonds and those inspirational roles that teachers play for so many of us.
Yeah, look, relationships are still the most important thing. Yep. I always say, that's what I always say to the teachers, when as soon as they come in, relationships, get that first, get that trust with the kids. So spend those first couple of weeks just getting to really know them, really understand them, because, the heavy hitting stuff, that's going to come. That's where we're going to be very prescriptive and, very repetitive sometimes, because all our students have got intellectual disabilities. They need more intensity and more repetitions to learn particular skills. The teachers get bored far faster than what the kids do. So it's like, but stay the course, because you'll see in the data, you'll see in their learning growth that what you're doing is making a significant difference to these kids, where traditionally, there hasn't been a strong focus on getting kids to read in any real design way, I suppose. So the bar was always fairly low, but now that we're lifting the bar, the students are meeting it. As long as the teachers are there, the students are meeting it.
One quick question, I'm sure some listeners are going to have this. Where do you fit those meetings in? There's a lot of meetings. Are there kids having teacher-free slots throughout the day? When do they happen?
Yeah, so we don't do any more meetings than what the Department of Education allows us to. We don't have any admin meetings at all. What we do is we do like a morning briefing, which is only for a couple of minutes. It's usually literally 5 minutes every morning, just to get our head around anything that they need to know administratively, any quick changes, daily organisation, like who's in, who's out, has there been any changes to duties. So that's every day, just for 5 minutes.
Yep.
But then we also have those 3 meetings after school every week, just for an hour. And there's also teacher planning time during the day, where I make sure that one of our newer staff is teamed up with a more senior staff and they plan together. So that also reduces the load, because depending on how that team chooses to do it, some of them are planning week on, week off. Others are just planning a whole series of lessons all together and basically mapping out the term. So they're always 3 or 4 weeks ahead. So it's their time, but the timetable is small enough that I'm still able to do that across my 11 classes, that yes, there's always time for teachers to come together during the school day to do some planning.
With your current growth rate, those small numbers may not be like that forever. Now you've done the Masters, you've led multiple schools, been a principal 15 years plus, served on boards, but you still describe special education as, I quote, not an easy job. What keeps you grounded in the work, and where do you draw energy from when the job gets hard?
Simple answer is the kids. I just love the authenticity that they bring to the job. If ever I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed or a bit cooked or whatever, I just walk out into the yard and I'll just kick a footy with them, have a chat with them, or go into the classroom. There's no filters with a lot of our students. They say it as it is, and I love that. And I think that's a model that they don't always say it in kindness. That's something we teach them. But I think it's a wonderful model. And it really invigorates me, because they'll tell me if things aren't going right, and if they have any suggestions about how the school could be run better, they've got no issues with telling me about it, and I love to hear it. So no, it's just really about that, because when I see them out there and they're confident and they're happy and they're learning, and these kids who we get, who've had quite a number of years of schooling before they come to us, who their self-esteem's really low and they've been unable to read and all that stuff. And then now in 3 or 4 years where they are now, and they're like school captains and all this stuff, and you just go, that's amazing. So I just love seeing the kids and the way that they grow and develop, and just building these really strong connections that are lifelong. Because I see ex-students in the community, and I'm served by them at McDonald's, and they're just so happy to see me and give me a wave. And I was like, that's what it's all about. Look, you may not have had these opportunities if we didn't do things the way that we did for you. So, no, that's what really floats my boat.
Awesome. Just finally, there's so much in this structure and the models you draw upon, etc. What's next? Is there a PhD in your future? Is there a way to tie some of this together in yet a bigger way, or is that just not on the horizon?
Oh, look, possibly. Through my Masters of Instructional Leadership, I did do the research pathway. So I've done the pre-work, the research methodology, so I could go into a PhD. But look, at the moment, while I've got a school, I've got my PASS, the president of PASS, there's only just so much I can do. Maybe somewhere down the future, but it would definitely be around how do we improve the educational outcomes of students with disability. There's not enough research in this space, and the vast majority of students with disability are in our mainstream schools. So anything that's going to help any kid who's coming from off the back foot, or then anything that I can do to help is what I'm all about.
Excellent. I mean, Dr. Cameron does have a good ring to it.
Oh, look, I don't know if I'd necessarily hold on to that as a title, but I would appreciate the opportunity to build my own knowledge as well as help to support others.
Cameron Peverett, thank you very much for being part of Around the School Table.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it.